Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest Top 5 episode. This is the show where I give a Top 5 list based on some topic in progressive rock or related genres, usually inspired by my wife. She's the one that comes up with these topics. And the idea of the show is I just come up with a list off the top of my head without much preparation, just based upon my knowledge of progressive rock, and let you guys know my list and use it as a jumping off point for you guys to give your list. And that's always the best part of this for me, is seeing everybody else's list, getting new recommendations, and really being reminded of some great stuff that I had forgotten about. So that's really a fun feature of this. So I recommend everybody looking at the comments and seeing everybody else's suggestions. It's really fun. And please subscribe if you haven't yet. If you like these top 5 shows, there's no reason not to subscribe and become aware of all of them as they come out each week. So thank you guys so much for your support. And without further ado, I better jump into the topic at hand today. So today we're talking about progressive metal. There's been a lot of progressive metal releases this year. That has been a large focus, it feels, to a lot of the album reviews and attention that's been given to some of the new releases this year. So it's got my wheels turning about my journey with progressive metal and some of the progressive metal songs that I have liked over the years. So this is the top 5 progressive metal songs. This was really hard to pare down to 5 tracks, and like I said, I came up with these basically off the top of my head. So if I spent a lot more time on this, I probably would come up with a whole different list. But I think it ended up being a pretty solid list and a great chance for me to basically talk through my journey of progressive metal, at least somewhat briefly. So when I got into prog, my dad's the one who really introduced me to the classic prog artists, Genesis and Yes and Gentle Giant. Those were his big 3 favorite bands. And it catapulted me into a journey into modern progressive rock. I looked up music. Is there music like this coming out today? At the time, of course, this was like over 20 years ago that I was going through this exploration, and I came across Transatlantic, and that led me into all the groups that make up Transatlantic. One of the first tracks I downloaded from all of this, because that's basically what I did, was I researched and downloaded a bunch of tracks from these different bands. And I downloaded a track from Dream Theater, but weirdly enough, it was a little bit heavy for my tastes at the time. And so I kind of shelved that one and focused more on the more symphonic side, the Flower Kings, Spock's Beard, Transatlantic. Those were the bands that connected. But as I heard more people talking highly about progressive metal bands, about Dream Theater, I had to listen to Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from Memory, and that really changed my view, and it sort of sent me in a spiral into all these great progressive metal bands of that early 2000s era. So that's really where my interests were focused, were on those big bands that were doing their thing around that time, as you'll see with my list. And it really made me a big fan at the time, and I was really hungry for all of these cool progressive metal releases. It sort of combined my love of progressive rock with my love of early alternative rock, modern rock, harder rock music that I liked more as a teenager. So it was a really cool mixing of those styles. And once I got over my fear of more heavier music, I was able to open myself up. And I'm still on this journey of struggling with some of the more aggressive stuff with growling vocals. And I'm starting to like some of it, but it has to be in certain circumstances. And the vocals usually, if there's going to be growling or heavy vocals, it needs to be balanced with some lighter, more clean vocals at the same time. So, but anyway, some honorable mentions. I know this is kind of a long preamble, but I wanted to give a bit of my history with progressive metal. Some things that I feel like have to be mentioned. Riverside's Second Life Syndrome is one of my favorite tracks, a really cool expanded track from their second album. Tool's Lateralis, which was actually a track I really liked before I really delved into progressive music. This was one I liked as a teenager in that alternative stage, but I think it has a lot to contribute to progressive metal. Arion, Isis and Osiris from Into the Electric Castle, which was a conceptual album that really blew my mind at the time. And of course, Arjen Lucassen leans into that heavier side of his sound oftentimes. I like the band Circus Maximus, maybe talking about a little bit of lesser known stuff. The Prophecy from the first chapter is just a really fun, exciting song, but for more of the prog metal, instrumental firework kind of stuff, Burn After Reading from their album 9 is a little cool gem that I really enjoy. I love Liquid Tension Experiment, so I want to mention Paradigm Shift, the first track from their first album, just really explodes and is this really great progressive instrumental metal music from several members of Dream Theater. Native Construct had an incredible album called Quiet World, which is one of my favorite prog metal albums. I thought of Chromatic Aberration for this list. Redemption, which just came out with a new album. I love their album Snowfall and Judgment Day, and the final track, Love Kills Us All and Life in One Day, is just fantastic progressive metal. So those are some of the ones I considered, but for my list proper, let's get into it. Item number 5 is Opeth and Ghosts of Perdition from their album Ghost Reveries. I really love Opeth. It was kind of a challenge, as I was talking about earlier, that I'm not as into the Cookie Monster growling vocals, so it was a bit of a journey trying to appreciate this band who everyone just speaks so highly of and loves. And I really fell in love with the instrumental side of the band. I just think they have some of the greatest instrumental work out there in the progressive metal field, and that great atmosphere, and they really have this great blend between the dark and the light side of their sound, this more folkier aspect that really bleeds into their more heavier metal aspect and makes for a really captivating combination of stuff. But Ghosts of Perdition just comes out of the gate just really solid, and it to me, it's a great balance between the heavier Cookie Monster style vocals that you're really attacked with at the outset, and then more of the lighter, cleaner vocals that Michael Ackerfeld really shines with as well, and just really brings you into this world of what they're accomplishing with a really cool track that just goes through so many different movements and modes throughout the track. And I do want to mention also that I tried to not go with the big epics, because I feel like that could be its own separate list. So I'm picking tracks that are more under 15 minutes. You know, a lot of these range between like 10 minutes or so. That's why you might not see some of the big, like, epic pieces. But feel free to mention them in your list. I'm not restricting anything. That's just how I thought of it. So if you're wondering why I didn't pick this or that or the other, like why didn't I pick Blackwater Park or something like that, that's why. I'm trying to pick more shorter tracks, shorter. These are all actually fairly long, but I'm trying to keep it under the epic length, which to me is probably around 15 minutes. So item number 4, I had to put something by Symphony X in here because I really loved them when I was getting into progressive metal. And I picked the track Revelation from Paradise Lost, the final track. It's just a really cool exploration of their sound, and it has this big grandiose feel. I love the symphonic feel that they put into their music and all the crazy instrumental stuff, but it still has that crunch and that heaviness. I thought about putting Awakenings from the album The Odyssey, another favorite of mine of theirs. It was really between the two because that's a little bit of a forgotten gem to me that I really love. I didn't go with the Odyssey title track because, like I said, I didn't want to go with the big epic. But I really love Revelation. I think that was my favorite when I was listening to them. I really like that pair of albums and that place in Symphony X's discography where they were still having some of those progressive influences, those symphonic styles, but really getting into a heavier direction that I thought sounded really cool. After this, they got even more heavy and really embraced more of that darker sound that was not as much my favorite as some of their older material. But this was like right in the sweet spot for me. So I really love this track. Item number 3 is Pain of Salvation's Perfect Element Part 1 from the Perfect Element album. I was obsessed with Pain of Salvation back in these days. I've sort of waned on them in recent years, unfortunately, but back when I was discovering progressive metal, this album in particular, The Perfect Element, just really blew me away because it was heavy. It had those heavier moments, but it also had some beautiful moments. It had some great vocal harmonies and some really beautiful songwriting, and it just really brought this emotional core that really, I think Daniel Gildenlow is brilliant at this, at bringing this emotional core into these heavier tracks. And I think the finale, that final suite, The Perfect Element Part 1, is just a really great finale for a really emotionally satisfying album. It's just really beautiful, and really personifies the genre in a very cool way. I think it has a unique flavor to it, and it showcases a very cool modern prog group. Item number 2, I have to go with Haken and their track Falling Back to Earth from the Mountain. I love Haken. My love for them has been well documented, especially in the last few weeks with their new album Fauna coming out. And I love The Mountain. I think that's their creative peak. I think that's their best album, at least from my perspective, my personal taste. And Falling Back to Earth is just a prog metal masterpiece that showcases why they're so talented. They're like the young new band, and they just really knock it out of the park by doing these quirky instrumental sections. They really bring in a lot of that prog flavor, but never sacrifice the heaviness and the metal background that they put with all of their songs. And there's a really cool, quirky instrumental bit in this track that always puts a smile on my face whenever it pops up. It's just, I love when they do that, when they go through something that's left of center, that's not quite what you were expecting, and come out with something really fun that's a cool blend of styles. And I think they're the masters now, to me, of modern progressive metal. They're the ones really carrying that torch into the new era, and I'm really happy for that. I think they're one of the best premium progressive metal bands that exist, and so hopefully they get their due amongst all these other heavyweights. But number 1, I have to, of course, pick something from Dream Theater, which is my favorite classic progressive metal group. You know, they really are the ones that came out of the gate and put the mark on the genre, really set it on its course to how it would go throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. I thought about picking Metropolis Part 1. That was kind of the obvious one that came to my mind from Images and Words. But I decided to subvert that a bit and go with The Glass Prison from 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, mostly because that was the song that I downloaded back when I was trying to discover progressive music, and the song that I thought was too heavy. You know, I thought this is like a Metallica, which isn't really my style. But thankfully, I went back to it later on in my exploration into the genre, and a whole new world opened up to me, and I'm like, this is fantastic. What was I thinking back when I dismissed this originally? Just a brilliant song that goes through so many different sections and movements. And what's cool about it is that it sparked this whole saga of tracks, this 12-step suite that Mike Portnoy had a lot of hand in writing about his experience with Alcoholics Anonymous and getting clean and all of that stuff. Going through the 12 steps for recovery from that illness and from that thing he was going through. So this is a really great jumping off point, and all the other subsequent tracks really call back to this in great ways. And so I just think it's a prog metal powerhouse that really showcases some of the best stuff in the genre, some great instrumental moments, some great lyrics, some great melodies and playing, and just everyone's on the top of their game on this track. So those are my favorite progressive metal songs, at least the ones I came up with in this moment for this video. Hopefully you liked my list, and like I said, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of other ones to talk about in the comments, and I'm really excited to see what you guys think about this topic. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this top 5, and hopefully you'll stick around and catch me in future episodes. So thank you guys so much, and keep enjoying the music, whether it's prog metal, prog rock, or whatever genre you enjoy. Bye, everybody!